www.videonews.com.
So, welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club in Tokyo. This is our new strategy to build up some suspense and wait. So we will be more excited to ask your questions later. As you all know, the Diet in the last weeks passed some important laws according to the national security of Japan, and especially the so-called, I have to look the exact title, designated secrets law caused some concern in Japanese public opinion, but in foreign media as well. So to get some first-hand information, we have a special guest today, Nakatani Gen-san. He has a long experience in politics in Japan. It's 23 years member of the parliament and Liberal Democratic Party. He was one of the first dealing with questions of national security, and when Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi had the then defense agency, they didn't have a real ministry at that time, he was the first on top of this organization, and now is in the, one of the main actors in the policy of national security. So he knows more than anybody else, I think, about National Security Council and how it will work, and especially the designated secret law, because he was one of the people played a key role in advancing this law. So if you have any questions, you have a good opportunity to ask today. We will start with some sort of introduction by Nakatani-san and have the Q&A session later. And as always, we would not understand everything without the help of Takamatsu-san, so give her a warm welcome too. So give a warm welcome to our guests and let's start.
Thank you. それでは皆さんこんにちは。本日は権威ある外国特派員協会にお招きをいただきましてありがとうございました。私は衆議院の NSC 法案並びに秘密保護法案を審議をいたします国家安全保障に関する委員会の筆頭理事を務めております中谷元でございます。名前は元ということで GN でありますが、決してジェネラルではございませんシビリアンでジェントルマンだと思っておりますけれども、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。
Hello, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak before this great FCCJ today. As was introduced, I am Gen Nakatani. I am the head director of the committee that deals with security issues, and therefore I was very much responsible for the discussions regarding the establishment of the new NSC and also the passage of the secrecy bill. My name, as I said earlier, is Gen Nakatani. I think everyone understood the joke. Gen does not stand for general. I am a civilian, and actually, Gen really stands for gentleman.
2001年、今から12年前ですけれども、小泉内閣で、ちょうど 9.11 の米国同時多発テロ事件の時の防衛庁長官でしたが、その時に防衛秘密というものを作った時の大臣でありまして、今回も石破幹事長のもとに特命副幹事長をしておりますけれども、この法案の審議の責任者を命ぜられまして、つくづく秘密保護に縁があるなと、国の危機管理の整備につきまして、運命的な責任と使命感というものを感じております。
As also was mentioned, I did serve as the head of the defense agency. This was 12 years ago in 2001. It was under the administration of Prime Minister Koizumi. This was a time when the terrorist attacks of 9/11 occurred. And as I was the head of the defense agency at that time, I was responsible for actually creating the concept of defense secrets and rules in that regard. In the current situation, I've been appointed by the Secretary General of the LDP to serve as a specially designated Secretary General in regard to these security matters. And therefore, as was explained earlier, I've been very much involved in the establishment of the NSC and also the passage of the secrecy bill. I therefore feel that when it comes to state secrets, I have seemed to have a destiny that is very closely intertwined with the passage or the development of such issues. I feel therefore sort of a destiny in regard to feeling terribly responsible for the passage of such rules.
まずこの法案がなぜ必要かと申しますと、まず今年の1月にアルジェリアの人質拘束事件がありました。現地で働く48名、うち10名の日本人が犠牲になりましたけれども、政府としてこの問題に対応する際に、フランス軍とか、またイギリス政府とか、アルカイダやこのイスラム聖戦士血命団というものの情報を知りたかったわけでございますが、やはりそういった貴重な情報を得るにつけてですね、我が国の体制があまり整ってなかったということで、あまり貴重な情報が得られなかったというふうに私は見ております。
In regard to why we felt that the secrecy bill did need to be passed, or the Designated Secrets Act needed to be passed, was I would refer you to an event that occurred in January of this year. This was when there was a hostage situation in Algeria. 48 citizens who were working in Algeria were taken hostage. Of these 48 people, 10 lost their lives. At that time, the Japanese government, of course, was very, very active in trying to do its part to try to free many of these hostages. During this time, we tried to gain a great deal of information from other governments, such as the French government, the UK government. Also, we tried to gain information about the organization involved, which was first of all, Al-Qaeda, and then another organization, which a literal translation would be the Blood Brotherhood of Islamic Sacred Warriors. However, because my understanding is that because Japan was seen to not have a very solid framework for protecting or preserving important secrets, we were not given access to very, very important information as much as we really would have wanted.
これは政権交代して安倍内閣としての最初の出来事、試金石で、ありまして、私は与党のこの問題の責任者になりまして、まず海外からの情報収集手段を増やすこと、そして海外における日本人の救出のために、陸上部分の自衛隊の救出活動ができていなかったので、その点の改正、そして NSC の必要性、並びにこの秘密保護の法律の整備というものをまとめて政府に要望いたしました。
With the change in government administration, one of the first tasks of the Prime Minister Abe's administration was to ensure that this kind of situation would be resolved. As a result, I was designated by the ruling party to become responsible for the issue of national security-related matters. As a result, I made several requests to the government. In other words, I described four priority issues that I felt needed to be taken care of. The first thing that I proposed was that we increase the channels that we have or the methods that we have to gain information from overseas. Secondly, I pushed for the need to revise some of the rules concerning the activities of the ground self-defense forces, because during that Algerian hostage situation, the ground self-defense forces were not able to be as active and participate in the rescue operations as we might have wished. I also pushed for the necessity of creating the National Security Council, the Japanese version of a National Security Council, and also proposed that that legislation be put into place to allow for the passage of the Designated Secrets Bill.
第2に日本ではオールジャパンの省庁の秘密を守り活用するという組織がありません。つまり、情報は各省ごとに秘密指定を、しているわけですが、例えば2001年12月、私が防衛庁長官の時に、九州の南西海域で、中国漁船に偽装した北朝鮮の工作船を海上自衛隊の P3C が発見をいたしました。でその際に、職員から担当者から こういうことがありましたと聞きまして、直ちにこれは海上保安庁に知らせなさいと言いましたが、職員はなかなか渋りました。というのは、防衛省から出した情報が他省へ行くと、それが漏れる可能性がある、そしてそれが漏れると、その情報源が使えなくなってしまうというような問題がありましたが、案の定、国土交通省に連絡をしたら、当時の大臣が記者発表をして、非常に私はなるほどというふうに考えたわけでございます。
Another reason I feel very strongly about these matters is that we have in Japan, we do not have in Japan an organization, a government organization that is able to protect all government secrets, or that is able to basically make use of all of these government secrets in a very uniform and consistent way. What I mean by this is that each ministry and agency has their own ability to designate certain pieces of information as state secrets, and there is not a coordinated effort between these agencies and ministries. To give you a specific example, in 2001 December, when I was serving as the head of the Defense Agency, there was an incident where a North Korean spy ship or mysterious ship, which had camouflaged itself and pretended to be a Chinese shipping vessel, Chinese fishing ship, was discovered by the Self-Defense Forces, P3C. This information was immediately given to me because I was the head of the defense agency, and I immediately said that this information should be transmitted to the Japan Coast Guard so that they could respond to this. However, my staff members were very reluctant to do so, saying that if we shared information with another ministry, there was a possibility that this information could be leaked, and the information source would therefore be compromised. In spite of this, however, I ordered that the information be shared, and immediately what happened was that the Japan Coast Guard is part of the Ministry of Land Infrastructure and Transportation, and immediately the MLIT minister gave a press conference announcing the discovery of this ship. This was, of course, for me, a bitter lesson.
今回、秘密保護法案というものを作ったのは、日本で最初の、この政府のオールジャパンのですね、法律でありまして、例えば5年ごとに指定をする、そして30年経ったら原則、公開をする、それから罰則を設ける、そういった今まで全くなかったものに、そういった適用するルールを作ったというのは、私は一つの前進であると思います。
So, in regard to this designated state secrets bill, I believe this is the first time that we have in Japan an all Japan, in other words, all Japan law, in other words, a law that covers all of the agencies and ministries in Japan. It is very specific about the rules. For example, every 5 years, all secrets will be reassessed to see whether that secrecy designation should remain. And in principle, all secrets will eventually be disclosed 30 years after they have first been designated as secrets. And we have also put together some penalties in place. All of these movements, I believe, are things that had not occurred in Japan before. So the fact that we have now a consistent, unified, all-Japan law is, I think, a very good step forward.
今回 NSC という組織を我が国に作りましたが、ここはいろんな省庁の人間が入っております。そしていろんな省庁の情報が入っていますけれども、ここで議論されることは、総理大臣、内閣の意思決定にとって必要なことでありまして、米国からの情報、他の国からの貴重な情報、そういうものを基づいて、分析をして判断をする、そのためにはこの情報が漏れないということを作る必要がありまして、法律の必要性につきましては、皆様もご理解していただいていると思います。
As you know, we have also moved forward with creating the NSC, the Japanese version of a National Security Council. This Security Council will be composed of representatives from different agencies and ministries in Japan. In other words, we will have an important access to information from all of these different agencies, organizations within the government. The purpose of the NSC is to be able to have very in-depth discussions so that information and good good analysis can be presented to both the Prime Minister and the Cabinet so that they can make the appropriate decisions. For the NSC to function well, we also need other information, not only from the government ministries and agencies, but information from the United States and other nations as well. It is on the basis of analyzing this information that the government will be able to make appropriate decisions. But because we are getting access to important information from other nations as well, it is important to ensure that we have a framework to ensure that there will be no leakage of such information.
そこで、審議の際に当然国民の皆様方からの疑念とか問題点がありまして、知る権利、これの両立とバランスを取るということで、私たちは審議を通じまして、まず事前に与党で修正をしておりましたが、審議で、日本維新、そして、みんなから修正事項をいただきました。また民主党とも政策協議をいたしまして、お手元の資料にありますけれども、12項目の修正を実施しました。
In regard to the deliberation process, during this deliberation process, it was perhaps only natural that many issues would be raised and much skepticisms and concerns would be expressed by not only the opposition parties but by the citizens of Japan. One of the issues that came up was whether the secrecy bill could achieve an appropriate balance between having the need for state secrets and at the same time ensuring that the people's right to know would be protected. Even before we had presented this draft bill, within the ruling parties, we had discussed this at some length and we had made many changes to the original bill. However, through the deliberation process in the Diet, we also took further suggestions from both your party and the Japan Restoration Party. We also had policy discussions with the DPJ as well. And as a result of all of these discussions and deliberations, we put together, and I think this has been handed out to you, 12 different changes or amendments to the original draft bill.
これは12項目はまず安全保障の規定を国の存立に関わることと定義、2番目には指定できる省庁を政令で定めるということで絞る、3点目は指定期限の上限を30年、しかしもう30年延長して例外を認める、これはアメリカ、イギリスの原則に合わせております。そして、30年ですべて公文書館に、一般の文書は移行する、5番目は国会、への情報提供、6番目は有識者の内閣保全諮問会議を設けて意見を聞く、7番目は国会に報告する、8番目は罰則の規定で、これは外国の利益、自己の不正の利益を図って、その目的で、行ったものに限り処罰をするということで、一般の報道目的とか知る権利は罰さないという規定、9番目は5年間特定秘密がない省庁は除外をされます。10番目は独立した公正な立場で検証・監察できる情報保全監察室、これは米国の公文書館の中にあります情報監察局を参考にしました。11番目は国会への提供、そして12番目はその他という項目が多かったので、それを的確な表明にいたしました。これが4党で修正合意をした内容でありまして、これによってほぼご懸念の点につきましては安心できる状態になったと思います。
So we put together, as a result of the deliberations between these four parties, an agreement to set forth these different changes, and there are 12 of them listed below. The minister went through them very, very briefly. Number one is that to limit what can be designated as state secrets, there is the definition that a state secret is something that has to do with the further survival or existence of the nation. Secondly, there's going to be a government directive that will limit which ministries and agencies can actually designate secrets. And number three talks about the fact that the designation of secrets can be extended to a maximum of 30 years. However, we've also put in a proviso that this 30-year provision could also be extended another 30 years, and there are specific restrictions as to what can be further extended, and have to have this 30-year period extended. Number four talks about the fact that fundamentally after this 30-year period when secrets are declassified, they will be stored in the National Archives. Number five talks about the fact that on these, this information will be reported to the Diet, depending on whether it has to do with the national interest. Number six has to do with the fact that there will be an information preservation advisory committee that will be established to advise the Prime Minister and the Cabinet about different things relating to the secrecy designation. Number seven has to do with the fact that things will be reported on a periodic basis to the Diet. Number eight has to do with the fact that, and this is a very long description which the interpreter will not translate in its entirety, but it fundamentally says that in regard to penalties, penalties will only be incurred by people who are, for example, working in conjunction with an enemy government, a foreign government, and doing something very unjust or illegal or wrong to try to obtain information. The point being here that average people trying to access information or asking about things are not subjected to these penalties. So it is not something that average people need to worry about. Number nine talks about the fact that for agencies and ministries that have not designated any pieces of information state secrets over a period of 5 years, they will be removed from the list of agencies and ministries that can designate as state secrets. Number 10 talks about the fact that a new organization will be put together, the Information Preservation Surveillance Room within the Cabinet Office. And this is basically going to be constructed along the basis of a similar organization in the United States, which is within the U.S. National Archives. It's a literal translation of this office would be the Information Surveillance Bureau, and that is what we're going to be creating a similar Japanese version of. Number 11 talks about the fact that the Diet will also be involved in various matters relating to the designation of state secrets. Number 12 talks about the fact that in the original bill there were many phrases that were used which said simply miscellaneous or and others, and this created quite a great deal of anxiety among many people. So that is going to now be clear. These phrases are now going to be clarified. The interpreter apologizes for this very quick summary.
議論の中で一番ポイントとなったのはその第三者機関でチェックをするということだったんですけれども、こういった特定秘密というのはこの行政の権限でですね、非常に漏らしたらいけない情報ですから、どの国も外に漏らすことがないように、その内閣や行政の中にチェック機関を作っております。で、この図が最新のですね、行政の考えている文書で、これは特定秘密ではありませんが、ここにお持ちしました。まず皆さんに分かってもらいたいのは、秘密を指定するのは各省庁なんですね。これが第一人者の機関です。でそれをこの内閣官房でこう見張ります。で官房の中にはすべての省庁の事務官クラスが入って、内閣官房長官をヘッドに情報監視委員会、これはアメリカの省庁間上訴委員会、これを模して作った組織であります。そして、横に内閣府、ここに、独立公文書管理官と書いてますが、日本の公文書は非常にまだまだ未成熟なんですけれども、この中に、情報保全監視室というものを設けまして、20人規模でスタートしますが、将来はこれを局に格上げすると政府は約束をしておりまして、この モデルはアメリカの情報保全、監察局をモデルにして、ここで第三者としてチェックをするということでございます。
So one of the things that was very fiercely debated in the Diet deliberations was the establishment of some kind of an outside third party to be able to check all of the activities regarding the designation of state secrets. As with any nation, whether we're talking about the United States or the UK, it is very important that state secrets, first of all, be designated as such, and that and that their management also be checked by a third party, and usually this third party is within the government in some way. And therefore, what we have come up with is this diagram that I have just shown you. There is a reporting line to the National Diet, but first of all, we have on the left-hand side something that is within, that is called the, I'm sorry. First of all, I would like to talk about things in this very large box to your left. And first of all, this is they're going to be reporting to the Prime Minister. But we have here on the left-hand side, in the center right here, we have the Cabinet Secretariat. And within the Cabinet Secretariat, we're going to be having a new organization which is called the Information Preservation Monitoring Committee. This is something that is going to be checking to see the appropriateness of the secrecy designation. This is going to be composed of parliamentary vice minister class bureaucrats from all of the different ministries and agencies. And as it is going to be the responsibility of the Cabinet Secretariat and Cabinet Office to just check to see what is being designated as secrets, they will be performing a very, very important function. I should also point out that it is not the Cabinet Office or any of these organizations that will actually designate specific pieces of information secrets, but rather people within each agency or ministry that will designate things as secrets. On the right-hand side, we have within the Cabinet Office the National Archives Administration. As you may know, the National Archives organization is not as highly developed as in, for example, the United States. Therefore, we are putting together this organization which will have bureaucrats that will be working on a more independent basis. Underneath them, we will have this Information Preservation Surveillance Committee, which will start off with about 20 people, but the government has promised that this will eventually be up-ranked, developed into perhaps a bureau with more staff. It is going to be, as I mentioned earlier, modeled along the lines of the Information Surveillance Bureau within the U.S. National Archives.
あと、行政以外のチェックとしましては、こちらに有識者の諮問会議、情報保全諮問会議というものを設けて、ここに意見の報告、そして、聴取をするということで、これを義務付けております。そして国会においても、この情報、特定秘密を国会に報告しなければならないと改正をしまして、それを受ける国会における監視機関の在り方、これは議長のもとに諮問機関として置かれて、提供された情報の取り扱いなど、各委員会で議論する際にですね、それをどう取り扱うのか、そして、その秘密をどのように守るのか、これは今まで国会の規定がございませんが、国会にそういった機関を作るということも施行までにやるというのが4党合意でございます。
Separately from these organizations within the Cabinet Office and the Cabinet Secretariat, we have on the left-hand side another third party, perhaps a more independent organization. This is basically an advisory council. The actual title is Information Preservation Advisory Committee. This will be composed of not bureaucrats, but rather of outside experts who will give advice as to how secrets should be designated and handled. Also, it has been agreed between the four parties that there will be reporting of secrecy, state secrets related matters to the National Diet. And in regard to how these secrets should be handled in regard to, for example, if there are going to be committee meetings within the Diet that want to discuss anything related to state secrets, how this should be managed, and how secrets should be protected. Until now, there were no such rules or laws restricting or limiting activities in the Diet, and so they will now be put together a new organization that will determine what kinds of rules need to be put into place so that adequate reporting about secrets can be made to the Diet.
でこの国会の在り方は今月19日から自民党内で、これを検討を開始をいたします。そして来年の1月の12日から19日までの間、合意をいたしました公明党、日本維新の会、みんなの党、それに、民主党、以上5党の合同の衆議院の視察団をドイツ、イギリス、アメリカに派遣をしていただきまして、そこで各国のこの国会と行政とのこの秘密の情報に関する、いわゆる国会の監視機関とか取扱機関とか、そういうものを見させていただくということでございます。
As I mentioned earlier, the next step, therefore, is to create some kind of a committee or an organization that will be able to set new laws or new rules as to how secrecy information can be handled by the Diet and how it can be presented to the Diet. We're actually going to start specific deliberations about these activities within the LDP beginning on the 19th of this month. In addition to this, early next year, from January 12th through January 19th, representatives of 5 parties, the LDP, the Komeito, the Japan Restoration Party, and your party, in other words, the 4 parties that actually helped draft or made changes to the bill, and also representatives from the DPJ. In other words, House of Representatives, lower house members from these 5 parties will travel together on a special mission to Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States to see how parliaments and governments are able to handle state secrets in other nations. In other words, if we want to see what kind of committees there are, for example, in different parliaments that govern the handling of state secrets. We want, in other words, to study the experience of other nations.
石破幹事長からは次の国会でこれの改正ができるように各党とも協議をしてほしいということでございまして、中身をよく詰めてですね、臨んでいきたいなと思っております。そして最後に、この法律の適用にあたってはですね、国民の知る権利という大変重要なことにつきましては、中で、決してその一般の方々が特定秘密というものをですね、知ろうとしてもこれは処罰できないということを明確にいたしております。ですからそういう意味において、一般の方々の知る権利を侵すものではないと思いますし、第22条にこの法律の適用にあたっては、これを拡張して解釈して国民の基本的人権を不当に侵害するようなことがあってはならず、国民の知る権利の保障に資する報道または取材の自由に十分配慮しなければならない、そういうことと共謀教唆扇動におきましてもそれが成立しないような規定も盛り込んでおりますので、ぜひ国民の皆様、そして報道される方々におかれましては、この法律に臆せずにですね、堂々とこれからもこの国民の知る権利に基づく活動はしていただいて結構だと思います。
I have been instructed by the Secretary General of my party, Mr. Ishiba, to work to get as much information as possible so that we will be able to bring, if necessary, revisions to this law at the beginning of the next session of the Diet. In other words, I've been instructed to have very close discussions with other parties on this matter. I would also like to end my speech by saying that I know there is great concern among many people about the secrecy law and whether there might be some possible violations about the people's right to know. I would like to reassure you that in regard to the average person's behavior, the penalties included in the designated state secret law really do not apply to them. In other words, if a person tries to know things, even if they eventually do learn about secrets, if it is within just an average person's behavior patterns, they cannot be penalized for such things. So I would like to again emphasize that the secrecy law does not in any way violate the right of an average person's right to know. In fact, we have made some very specific stipulations. For example, in clause 22, it says very clearly that there should be no later enlarged interpretations about this bill so that the human rights of basic people can be violated. It also talks about the fact that there should be given due consideration to the necessity of media organizations to be able to broadcast news and to be able to conduct news gathering activities. Also, in article or clause 24, it talks about the fact that the criminal concept of instigating something, in other words, forcing someone to try to do something illegal, or which has to do with, for example, conspiracy, etc. There are very clear stipulations that when an average person conducts average, regular behavior patterns, takes regular actions, they will not be subjected to such penalties. So what I would like to say is, for those of you who represent the media today, please feel free to conduct your activities as before and based on the premise that people do have the right to know. This secrecy bill is not designed to inhibit your activities in any way.
以上で私のスピーチとさせていただきます。どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for your kind attention.
So now, please feel free to ask your questions. As there might be more questions, I would like to limit your questions to one and try to keep yourself as short as possible. So, Siegfried.
Siegfried Niedl, freelancer from Germany. When Mr. Abe came in office, he said the politicians should control the bureaucrats. But I think the new law prolongs the regiment of the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats in the last decide what's secret and what not. And the three commissions are mostly based on bureaucrats. In other countries, if you go next year to Germany to see what in Germany happens, in Germany there is a parliamentarian commission every time to control what is the secret policy of the government. And this permanent control of a parliament commission, I think I miss a similar thing in this law now.
はい、ドイツには議会統制委員会というものがあると聞いております。これは連邦の憲法擁護庁、そして軍事防長局並びに連邦情報局の活動の統制に関して議会でチェックすると聞いておりまして、今回4党プラス民主党の視察団においてはこちらに行きまして話を聞いていきたいし、またジャーナリストの方にもお会いしてジャーナリストの視点で、どういうふうになっているのか聞いていきたいと思います。これですね。これ憲法擁護庁守る。
Thank you very much for your comment, for your question. Actually, we have heard that in Germany there is a committee within the parliament, the Bundestag, called the Bundestag. The direct translation would be the Parliament Control Committee, and that based on the federal constitution, they oversee basically the activities of the Constitutional Preservation Agency, the the agency that is also in charge of military matters, and also the agency that is in charge of information. So this is exactly the committee that we want to see when we visit Germany in January. As I mentioned earlier, 4 parties and 1 other 5-party representatives are going to see their activities. We also have been given the opportunity to perhaps visit with journalists to get an outsider's point of view about this matter as well.
あと政治家のリーダーシップにつきましては、これまで何もなかったんです、法律が。でそれを今回官邸の中に、オール省庁の監視委員会を作りますので、大臣がそこに非常に影響を受けるわけです。そして内閣府にも監察室を設けますので、こういう形で政治のリーダーシップの強化ができると思っております。
In regard to your question about whether or not there has been political leadership, there's a way to ensure political leadership over the bureaucrats. In fact, until now, there was actually no framework or no laws to ensure that political leadership could be maintained, and that is exactly why this time we're going to be putting into the Prime Minister's office an all-Japan organization that will be able to oversee information. It's basically a surveillance committee, and this is where ministers will be able to have much influence. As I mentioned also earlier, we're also putting together several different organizations within the Cabinet Office as well. I think it is with the establishment of these new organizations that we will be able to ensure the kind of political leadership that we need.
Okay, please.
My name is Khalid Azhar, Panoramic News. You mentioned that when the North Korean ship were caught as pretending to be a Chinese fishing ship, you didn't want to reveal this information to the people. So the Minister of Land informed the Japanese people about it. So along with this, why did you want to hide this information about Japanese people? And there are secrets also we learned here in the club from other speakers that Japan had nuclear weapons, or American ship had some nuclear weapons on Japanese land. And also in Iraq, there were secrets that Japanese planes helped American soldiers with their arms to move from other places, which was, according to Japanese, a violation of constitution. So why do you want to keep these secrets from the Japanese people? Is it for the sake of Japan? Thank you.
はい、情報の開示というのは時の政府の判断によるものだと思っております。で、私は数年前の尖閣事案のビデオ、これは早く公開した方が良かったと思っておりますし、必要なことでありましたら国民にですね事実を公表するというのは基本だと思います。しかしながらそのことによって我が方の手の内手段などを知られますとその後そのツールが使えなくなってしまいますので、これは最終的に政府が判断することでありますが、できるだけ大事なことは速やかに事実を公表すべきだと思っております。で私が言ったケースはやはり日本の官僚の体質でありまして、自分で抱えておきたいというようなことがあったのではないでしょうか。そういう意味では知らせることは早く知らせるわけですが、きちんと公表するときはよく調整はしておく必要があるのではないかと、そういう意味においては今回 NSC が設立をされたことによって省庁間の調整がスムーズに行われるのではないかと思っております。
In regard to your question basically about information disclosure, I think specific decisions about disclosing specific pieces of information are made by the government or administration in power at that time. In regard to, for example, the incident regarding the Senkaku Islands, the ship that there was a video that was eventually leaked about a ship. In regard to something like that, I believe that was something that should have been disclosed very, very quickly. Of course, the administration in power at that time made a slightly different decision. Fundamentally, therefore, my feeling is that information should be disclosed to the public, shared with the public as quickly as possible. That is my fundamental stance. However, as I mentioned earlier, there are occasions where if one discloses information, one also discloses the method of obtaining that information. In other words, one discloses or gives away vital information about the tools one has at one's disposal to be able to gain valuable information for a nation's security. And if that information is disclosed, that tool no longer becomes usable because people already know about it. Of course, in the final decision, always lies with the government in power, and they have to make. But as I said, I believe fundamentally that information should be disclosed. In fact, the example that I gave you was an example of the tendency of bureaucrats to want to hold information very close to their vest, not wanting to share it with even other bureaucrats. But I fundamentally feel that information should be shared with others. However, in that case, as I mentioned, the minister went on to make an announcement and basically gave away our methodology of obtaining very important information. So I think that when information is shared between ministries, there should be proper adjustment and coordination between ministries before any official announcements are made. And the fact that we now have this NSC, National Security Council, in place means that we will be able to have this kind of important coordination between agencies.
Any questions? The gentleman over there, and then next one, Martin Körling. You. No, you already tried for a long time.
吉川と申します。
はい、
先生も顧問になっていただいている安全保障危機管理学会というのが、ワシントン特派員的な仕事をしておりまして、はい、東日本大震災の後ずっと機関紙に連載してきたものがちょうど最近 2,3 日前こういう本にまとまったんですが、これの中でも私日本に危機管理専門の役所を作って、それと日本版 NSC がどう協力するかというようなところを最後の方で触れてみたんですが、ちょうど国会内で本の内容の発表させていただいたのが法案の特定秘密法案の可決された日でして、その時私は思ったんですが、日本語の情報、これが英語のインテリジェンスとインフォメーション、これどっちなんだということをはっきりさせていないんで、こういう国会内であれだけ反対する声が上がったりしているのではないかと。例えばある特定のテロ集団が日本のどの原発を狙っていて、それと戦うために自衛隊、警察、日本の自衛隊、警察がどういうふうにしようとしているか、これを隠すのはもう当たり前、もう国民を守るために当たり前だけれども、もしテロであれ、地震であれ、何か何らかの理由で原発がまたメルトダウン状態になったときに、経済産業省や文部科学技術省、環境省、自衛隊、消防、そういうところがどう対処しようとしているか、これに関してはむしろ積極的に情報を開示して、どこが足りないんじゃないか、みんなの意見を聞く。でもちろん今言った各省庁間がお互いの情報を開示して、協力体制を築く。そうでないと今度何かあったときにまた前回と同じかもっとひどい失敗をしてしまうんじゃないかと。ここら辺の英語でいうインテリジェンスとインフォメーションの違いを分けて考えるということの問題点、先生のご意見をぜひ伺えればと思います。
はい。
My name is Yoshikawa. I've been doing a great deal of work in regard to these areas of study, and I've actually issued a book which was actually published on the day that the secrecy bill was passed. Basically, what I would like to say is that in regard to the secrecy bill that was being deliberated in the Diet, I think one very, very root cause of much of the conflicts was the fact that when we talk about when we talk about information in Japan, there are two words used for information. One is joho, which literally can be translated as information, and the other translation could be intelligence. In other words, there are two English translations of the same word, joho, in Japanese, and there has not been made a similar distinction. There should really be two different words in Japanese so that you can identify between information and intelligence. What I'm saying is that, for example, if we find out that a terrorist organization is planning to attack a nuclear power facility, of course, all of that information as to what movements or what measures the self-defense forces are taking, what activities the police department is taking, that it falls under the realm of intelligence, and that information should be made secret. But on the other hand, if there is some terrible disaster situation that occurs to a nuclear power plant, regardless of what the original cause was, whether it was a terrorist attack or an earthquake or whatever, if a terrible situation has arisen, this is information, and I think everyone, all of the ministries involved, whether it's METI or the Environmental Department or the Fire Department, regarding what they are doing, this is information that should be disclosed so that people can understand what further needs to be done, what measures are missing, etc. So I think there needs to be some kind of a distinction made between intelligence and information in Japan.
まさに911から311ということで政府の危機管理は大事だと思います。でまさに省庁間バラバラの取り組みとかですね、総理大臣が不要に個別に指示をするようなものではなくて、やはりきちんと組織として、誰が総理大臣いいようにですねシステムを作っておくと。でそういう意味では今回の NSC、これは非常に司令塔になるべきもので、通常は4大臣会議ですけれども、その必要に応じて関係閣僚が入る会議を設けます。で問題はこの事務局が今回しっかりしたということでありまして、できるだけ多くの情報をここに入れて、分析をして、そして評価をして、活用する、いわゆる情報のサイクルをですねこの際もっともっと充実をしておく必要があるのではないかと、まさにインフォメーションとインテリジェンスの違いが分かるようなねそういう組織であるようにするためには情報の分野の充実というのは相当これやっておく必要があると思いますので、今後そういった危機管理のための組織仕組みにおいては大いに検討する必要があると思います。
As is mentioned in the title of your book, from 9/11 to 3/11, we can see that during the period between these two events, the crisis management in Japan has been a topic of great interest, and there have been a great lack of coordination between the different agencies and ministries involved. We've seen examples where, for example, the Prime Minister issues orders that are perhaps unnecessary just on his own whims. What is truly necessary is to have a structure, an organization, a framework in place so that regardless of who is the Prime Minister, proper decisions can be made and proper procedures are put into place. In that sense, I believe the establishment of the National Security Council is a very good step forward. Fundamentally, as you know, the National Security Council will be composed of the 4 ministers of specific agencies. However, depending upon the topic, on the problem at hand, it is possible to increase the meeting to include other ministers as well. And what is perhaps even more important is that there will be put together a permanent staff that will be able to collect information, to analyze information, and to verify information. In other words, they will be able to create a proper cycle to ensure that information is collected and analyzed and verified on a regular basis. In other words, we are trying to aim to create an organization and staff who will be able to distinguish between information and intelligence, and I think that is a way to be able to better handle crises in the future.
Thank you very much.
Martin Köhling.
Martin Köhling with the German financial daily Handelsblatt. First, a follow-up to Khaldun's question. I think you didn't fully answer his question. What about in a case that action of a government or self-defense forces violates the constitution but is classified as secret? What happens in cases like this? So please, could you elaborate on this one? And my question is, you mentioned that you are now going to Germany. You are visiting the UK to find out how their parliamentarian control is being implemented. I mean, I would have expected that something like this, something so basic like this, would have been done before the law would have been drafted. Because this is a very basic question: who is controlling what? Why the haste, pushing the law through, and then basically, in the end, after the fact, basically trying to put the basics in again? Why the haste?
はい、まずご指摘のように早く 視察をした方が良かったと思いますが、しかし基本的骨格というのは従来、あるように各省がですねその仕事をする上においてこれは指定する必要があると判断しますので、責任者は大臣です、各省ごとの。でただそれにいかに厳正な判断をするかということで、今回総理官邸の方にそれを見る監督する権限のある組織、そして一つ離れた国立公文書館にですね類するような内閣府にですねそれを評価して観察をしてそして勧告を行う、そして総理にも報告をするような監察部を作ったことによって、より厳正された不正のない形での各省庁のですねこの文書管理というものができるのではないかなと思っております。
First of all, I would like to say that I understand what you're saying about we should probably have done this kind of a mission in advance. However, I would also like to point out that when we created this draft bill, it was not as though we were suddenly creating out of scratch the idea of designating certain pieces of information secrets. This activity was already being conducted by each of the agencies and ministries on their own. In other words, each agency and ministry determined that certain pieces of information should be handled as top secret pieces of information. And the person responsible in each agency and ministry for this final decision was the minister or the director of each ministry or agency. What we have done with this secrecy law, designated secrets law, is to bring the system to a higher level. In other words, not having the person responsible be just the minister, but the prime minister. In other words, creating a framework so that the prime minister would be able to directly oversee what was happening regarding secrets, designations of secrets in each of his ministries, and separately from that, to ensure that the process was proceeding correctly, to put at one further remove within the Cabinet Office this organization that would work under the National Archives organization, which is the Information Preservation Surveillance Office. In other words, what we fundamentally wanted to do was take a system that already existed and refine it and make the reporting line and the surveillance lines more clear. In other words, there would be more oversight by the Prime Minister and the Diet.
で日本の場合は議院内閣制ですから国会で総理大臣を選び、内閣ができてますので、ある意味与党は内閣の連帯責任もありますが、しかし行政と立法という関係においてはこういった秘密を指定をして、国を守り国民の命を守るというのは行政権として、これは犯してはならない分野でもありますが、かたや立法権で行政を監視監督するという役割がありますので、今回この法案の審議中にですね国会における特定秘密の提供、その後の取り扱い、国会議員の罰則、これは今まで全く議論もしてこなかったところでありますので、こういった現状を受けまして、国民がしっかりこれ監督してくれという声を受けまして、これを監視監督するのはやっぱり国会が一番最適のものでありますので、その期待に応えるような仕組みを作ってみたいと思います。
As you know, Japan is a parliamentary democracy, and as a result, it is the Diet members who basically choose a prime minister and the cabinet. So in that sense, I believe the ruling party or parties do have an associated responsibility or a mutual responsibility for the decisions of the cabinet. I would also like to point out that separately from the legislative functions of the Diet and the legislative authority of the Diet, the government, the bureaucracy also has administrative rights as well and responsibilities as well. In other words, they have the administrative right to determine what pieces of information are going to be labeled secret in order to ensure the defense of the nation. And of course, the Diet has the responsibility as a legislative branch to oversee the workings of the administrative branch. Until now, there was no such framework or no such process or structure that would enable such thing to be done. And that is why we are now contemplating creating within the Diet a committee or a commission or some kind of organization that will be able to determine fundamental rules about how these kinds of secret information should be handled, who they should be presented to, and what kind of penalties might be incurred for disclosing that kind of information. In regard to the anxieties and the concerns expressed by the people of Japan, it seemed to be that the Diet would be the best organization possible to provide such oversight, and that is why we're trying to create this kind of a commission within the Diet.
違憲行為があったかどうかという問題は従来国会で審議されておりますので、その点においては立法府としては正当な判断はしておりますが、司法においてもこういったものは訴訟で行われておりまして、それぞれの判断が行われているところでございます。
So in regard to your question about possible infringements or violations of the Constitution, these are matters that periodically arise in the Diet and are deliberated in the Diet. And I believe that as a legislative branch of the government, we have made proper and appropriate decisions on various matters. It is also possible that the judicial arm of the government also plays a role. There have been court cases brought before the judicial branch, and they have also made, I believe, appropriate decisions.
それにもう一つ問題点としてこの特定秘密を国会が受けるとなりますと、じゃあどうそれを守るのか、その情報に基づいて審議すればより的確な審議ができますが、一つの問題は憲法において国会における議員の発言においてはこれを罪に問われないという規定があります。しかしながらこの特定秘密はそれを受け取った者は5年それを漏らした場合は5年以内の罰則がありますが、それに加えて国会法でどのような秘密を守るルールができるのかどうか、それは今後の大きな課題です。
Also, I do also want to bring to your attention another issue that is facing us in that when secrets are handled by the Diet, how will that secrecy be ensured? In other words, how can we prevent a leakage? There is within the Constitution a protection afforded to Diet members in that when things are deliberated within the Diet, they cannot be penalized for matters that are discussed that they mention or talk about within Diet sessions. But on the other hand, we do have this new secrecy bills that says that leaking of information does carry a penalty. So how do we resolve this issue? This is one of the things that we have to create perhaps a new part of the Diet law that will govern the handling of secret information within the Diet.
So if there are many hands raising, just once again I try to ask you please one question and please keep yourself short. The shorter the better. So the gentleman over there and then you. You, yeah.
Eric Slavin, Stars and Stripes. If, for example, there were an incident in the East China Sea that a current or future agency decided should be in part or totally secret, and a journalist were to ask a bureaucrat about it and then print that information, under this law, would that journalist be subject to any kind of penalty for using inappropriate methods to report that information?
I'm sorry, sir. Excuse me, the interpreter blanked out for a moment. Could you just repeat that question again? I'm so
Okay. If wait, let me remember what my question was now. Yes. If there was an incident in, for example, the East China Sea, and part or all of that incident were considered to be secret by a current or future government agency, and the journalist went and found out some of that information from a bureaucrat, would that journalist be subject to arrest or any penalty for using inappropriate methods to obtain that information?
.それは大丈夫でございます。法律の中にこれの処罰されるかどうかにおいては第24条に外国及び自己の不当利益を図り我が国の安全に 等を害すべき用途に供する目的で、人を欺き、人に暴行を加え、人を脅迫する行為、財物の搾取、破壊、施設への侵入、電話の傍受など、不正アクセスと秘密を保有する者の管理を害する行為によって特定秘密を取得した者は10年以下の懲役に処するとなっておりまして、これをもちまして一般の市民やマスコミの取材というのは罰せられることがないということでございます。
The fundamental answer is that no, that journalists would not be penalized. And the reason I say this is that if you look at Article 24 of the Secrecy Bill, the interpreter would you like for me, the interpreter, to just do a little translation of this? All right. It basically says that a person will be subjected to a penalty of less than 10 years if he does the following things. Basically works for his own, for the interests of another nation, or for the inappropriate interests of himself, and takes actions that will somehow impair the safety of the nation, the lives of the people, or possibly inflict harm bodily harm on the citizens of the nation. If he also therefore uses improper methods, and the article goes into much more detail about the improper methods. For example, uses threats or violence, engages in theft or destroys property, illegally enters facilities, eavesdrops on wire telecommunications, or perhaps uses other inappropriate or illegal accessing methods, and in that way gains access to this kind of secret information. He would be subjected to a penalty of less than 10 years of incarceration. However, the article basically what is said here is that the average person trying to get information and the news gathering activities of the mass media are not subject to this kind of penalty.
でもう一点申しますが、一般の人はそれが特定秘密かどうか分かりません。秘密かどうか分かっているのはそれを取り扱う人だけで、ありますので、取材とか一般の方々は分からずに取材しておりますし、もう一点はそういう外国のからのスパイ行為とかテロ活動とかそういう目的で、それをアクセスするということしか処罰されませんので、通常の取材は自由にしても罰せられないということであります。
And I would like to add further clarification because this information which has been designated as state secrets, that designation is not known by the average person, including journalists. Therefore, if the average person asks about these matters and journalists asks about these matters, they are not subjected to penalties. I would go even further and explain that it says very clearly that these information gathering activities are only subjected to penalties if the person is trying to get this kind of information on the behalf of a foreign government, in other words, engaging in spy activities, or is perhaps trying to work on behalf of a terrorist organization. So regular activities by regular people or journalistic activities are not covered by the Secrecy Bill.
フリーのジャーナリストの田中隆作と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。与党の先生方がおっしゃるように十分な議論を尽くしたというのであれば、11月25日福島の口述人7人が全員反対したのにもかかわらず翌日衆議院特別委員会で、採決したのはなぜですか。で与党の先生方がおっしゃるように十分な議論を尽くしたというのであれば、5日大宮での公聴会はなぜ、前日の夕方開いて前日の夕方決めて、翌日開きで翌日とうとう参議院で可決してしまったのですか。すべてこれ誰が考えてもこれ暴走だと思うんですが、中谷先生はそうお思いにならないでしょうか。
Excuse me, I'm a freelancer and I would like to ask about the clarification of the government's position. The government has said repeatedly that it feels, or the ruling party has said repeatedly that enough deliberation has been conducted in the Diet to hold a vote on this bill. If, however, that is true, on the 15th of December, when there was a special committee meeting, why, in spite of the opposition that was presented, the bill was pushed through the House and the House of Representatives. And on December 5th, there was a public hearing held in Omiya. It was announced the previous evening, it was held, and then the next day the bill was passed. In other words, from an outsider's objective point of view, we can only feel that the bill was railroaded through the Diet. In spite of this, the ruling parties could stick to their position that there has been enough deliberation. If that, what are your comments?
福島での公聴会を決めたのは私です。これは与党の筆頭としてですね、単なる儀式的な公聴会じゃなくて、あえて、いろんな疑問を持っている人で、特に浪江町の馬場町長、非常にこれの情報公開について大きな疑問を抱いてましたので、あえて私は指名をいたしました、与党として。で確かにご懸念は表せられましたが、話を聞いてみるとスピーディーですね、これの公開が遅くて住民が避難が遅れたということですが、本来スピーディーというのは公開のための情報であって、特に秘密指定された情報じゃなくて、これは情報の出し方が遅かったと、つまり危機管理とか情報の公開の話でですね、今後この原発関連において特定秘密に指定されるとかどうかという質問は国会でも出ましたが、これは指定されません。ただ警備安全のための情報については指定される可能性があるということでありますが、こういったことからしてですね、まだ疑問は残るかもしれませんが、馬場町長がおっしゃったご懸念についてはですね、これは危機管理の問題であるので、それはそういうものですかという意見を持ちました。で採決したのはやはり、この問題についてもう2週間以上ですね議論をしまして、ある意味論点が出たということで、次の日に総理をお招きしてですね質疑を行って判断をしましたが、定められた会期の中で一つの結果を残さなければならないということで、衆議院段階ではああいう形になりました。参議院につきましては参議院の独自のご判断があったと思いますので、私から言及はされませんが、やはり国民の皆様から見てですね拙速な決定のように見えたということは否めませんけれども、中身的には4党合意に基づくようなですね中身的なものの補完は行ったつもりでございます。
Excuse me, the interpreter misheard the first part of the question, which was not the government committee within the Diet, but rather there was a public hearing held in Fukushima. And in regard to that Fukushima public hearing, it was actually I, myself, as the person responsible in the ruling party that suggested that this public hearing be held in Fukushima. The reason I suggested this public hearing was that I had heard that there were many concerns raised about the secrecy bill by persons in Fukushima. In particular, there was Mr. Baba, who was the mayor of Namie town or city, who had been very vocal in his protestations, and I wanted to be able to have an opportunity where he would be able to talk about this with members of the Diet. And as I listened, however, to his anxieties and concerns, we came to realize that his primary concerns were about what happened immediately after the Fukushima accident. In particular, he was very concerned about the fact that the information gained by the computer system, SPEEDY, which would predict the way that radioactive matter would be eventually dispersed into the air, that information was withheld from the public for some time. He was very upset about that because he said that many people who were exposed to radioactive materials who might have been able to avoid such exposure if that SPEEDY information had been disclosed earlier. However, we talked about the fact that the information from Speedy was not something that was ever going to be designated as a state secret. In fact, the Speedy information was actually designed to be able to give information to people as quickly as possible. So the reason that this information from Speedy was delayed in its disclosure was not due to anything regarding state secrets, but because there was a problem with crisis management at that time. And so, of course, in the future, and I know this similar questions about this have been raised in the Diet deliberations as well, information from Speedy, that kind of information is not intended to ever be designated as state secrets. Having said this, however, if there are specific other kinds of information that have to do with security and safety that cannot be disclosed, they might be treated separately. But the Speedy information is originally designed for information disclosure. So I believe that we were able to clarify that he was more concerned about crisis management activities concerns rather than the state secrets concerns. In regard to your idea about your comments about how this bill seems to have been railroaded through the Diet, we did have 2 weeks of deliberations, and as a result of these 2 weeks of deliberations, I believe the main points of contention, the main issues that needed to be worked on in the future were identified. Yes, as a result of 2 weeks of deliberations, on the following day, we asked Prime Minister Abe to attend the Diet session, respond to question and answers, and then we also had a responsibility to leave some kind of fruits or results by the end of the scheduled Diet sessions. And so that is why we took the decision that we did in the House of Representatives. In regard to how the bill was handled in the upper house, that of course was determined by the representatives of the upper house, and I really cannot make any comments about that. I do understand that there have been criticisms raised by the people that it seems to have been a very rushed process, but I would also like to point out that in regard to the final contents of the bills, we have included the concerns and amendments offered by the 4 parties who were involved in drafting the final bill.
So the French colleague from the far right, Joanna.
Joël Lejean, RTL Broadcasting. Thank you for your answers. Regarding those designated secrets that you're going to hide from the public, I suppose and I assume, as in my country where we have those defense secrets, for example, we don't know things about Libya or things like that, I suppose that those things are related to defense issues, as my colleague from Star and Stripes mentioned. So is that what you want to emphasize mostly? Because there was such complicated communication from your government on these issues, and after all, we haven't heard about this secret bill just before a woman, Talento, started to talk about it and oppose this secret bill. So, to communicate better, could you tell us if it's just related to a war case that you plan with China, to make it simple?
はい、原則30年公開、そしてやむを得ない場合は60年、その中でも、例外としては暗号とか人の名前とか交渉上不利益をもたらすような外交的な事柄とかそういうことで7項目、指定を、したわけでございますが、しかしいずれの国も例えばアメリカでも80年超え、75年超えですね、アメリカ75年超え、イギリスでも100年を超えるということで、おそらくフランスでもさまざまな兵器を開発をしておりますので、それに関する事項とか情報インテリジェンスの内容とかですね、そういったもので、その開示した場合に、国家において不利益をもたらす、つまり国益を損なってしまうことにおいては保持をしていくと思っております。で今回の議論を通じて我が国の場合はそれはもう本当に技術的な問題とか外交的な問題で、必要最小限度にとどめるように規定したつもりでございますので、そのような限定された中で、この国民にとって必要な歴史的な検証とか外交文書等につきましては公開して後のようにですね判断できるように、そのためにあまりにも国立公文書館というのが 日本の場合貧弱でありますので、今回ご指摘もありましたけれども、こういった行政文書の公開につきましては今後の課題として検討していく必要があろうかと思います。
Fundamentally, the kinds of pieces of information that we are going to be labeling secrets, fundamentally they are going to be disclosed after 30 years. There are going to be some exceptions where that secrecy designation can be extended another 30 years. There are 7 different areas where special exceptions can be made. For example, in regard to codes, in regard to specific people's names, in regard to information that might adversely affect negotiations that would hurt the interests of the nation. I believe that these kinds of exceptions to this fundamental 30-year disclosure rule, similar exceptions exist in other nations as well. For example, there are some kinds of secrets where the secrets designation can be even longer than 75 years. In the United States, in the UK, there are some secrets that can be designated secrets for over 100 years. And I think in France as well, there have been many weapons development projects embarked on by your country. As a result, I'm sure there are many items that are listed where that information cannot be disclosed for a very, very long time, information intelligence. But fundamentally, the kinds of secrets that we want to designate as secrets are going to be things that will somehow impair or hurt the interests, the national interests of the nation. However, we have had a great debate on this matter, and our fundamental approach is try to limit the kinds of information that can be labeled as state secrets as much as possible. They are probably going to be things that are related to diplomatic issues or things that have to do with technological issues. They're going to be as limited as much as possible. We want to also take the approach that the people do have the right to know, and they should be able to access as much of government administrative documents as possible so that they will be able to review history and make proper assessments and analysis of what has gone on before. This leads me to something that I've mentioned several times, which is that the National Archives Administration in Japan is not a very well-developed organization at all. And so the idea of preserving government or official administrative documents has not really been well thought through in the past. This is an issue for us to consider in the future.
So, any more questions? Yes, over there.
Thank you very much. Terry Jimbo with videonews.com. You mentioned, Nakatani Sensei, the Article 24 of the revised version of the law, which says that you will not be punished even if you access the secret, unless your purpose is to advance the interests of foreign countries, damage the Japanese national security, and so forth. So journalists are okay. That's the interpretation I hear from our LDP and the government. However, that article or law does not say anything about reporting. It says a lot about obtaining the information. And our job is not just to obtain information, but we obtain information, journalists obtain information to report. So my question is this. If a journalist, after becoming aware that it is the secret, the state secret that he has in hand, reports it, terrorists, foreign countries will read the article or see the report. If you do it, are we in danger of getting arrested or at least subject to this law? Thank you.
はい、まず知らずに報道したら全く問題がありませんが、それが知ってた場合ですね、これにおいてはこの法案においては非常にそれが本当にできるのかなと。つまり特定秘密というのはもう限定された部屋の中で金庫に収まってますし、それが特定秘密かどうかを知っているのはそれを扱う人だけでありますので、そういう人が漏らせばですね、その人は処罰されますが、それを受け取った側は先ほど言ったようなスパイ行為とかテロ行為とかそういった目的でですね、その不当な取材を不当な手段で取得したという、まずその目的があるかないかによって判定されますので、そういう目的がなくて 入手したというケースとか、それを知りながらというのはおそらく考えられませんけれども、報道したという人は罪に問われないということでございます。
First of all, it's a little difficult for me to imagine the situation that you presented because even before that, I would like to first clarify that if one obtains information which has been designated secret and broadcasts it or discloses information without knowing that it has been designated a state secret, that journalist or media is not subject to any penalty. That is the first thing I would like to say. In regard to the situation described, it is first of all a little difficult for me to imagine such a scenario occurring because the control or management of state secrets is now going to be very carefully managed. In other words, there's going to be basically a state secrets room, and there will be a state secrets safe in which this information will be put. And only a certain number of people who have special permission will be able to handle such secrets. Of course, yes, it is true that if that person does leak this information, that person will be subjected to penalties. But again, I would like to refer back to this Article 24, which says that the intent behind the revealing of this kind of information on the part of the person who gains this information, journalist or media, is very, very important. If that person or that media reveals this information with the intent to conduct some kind of spy activities or with the intent of somehow helping terrorist organization, with the intent, in other words, of trying to somehow impair the national interests of Japan, then that might be something different. But if it is simply that the person or the media organization, even if for some reason were understood that the information that they were holding was actually designated a state secret, if that person, without that kind of motivation, reveals this information, I do not think he would be subjected to penalty.
So please allow me the last question for today. You mentioned your trip to Germany, America, and England. Can we expect that there might be a new second law to strengthen the control function of Parliament, so some sort of amendment, or is it just for information?
はい、これはお手持ちの資料で合意事項に書かれた一番最後から2つ目ですね、11ポイントで国会における規定におきまして、この日本の憲法、国会法の精神にのっとれば国権の最高機関であって各委員がですね、会議その他の手段、内部の規律に関する規則を定める権能を有するということでありまして、やはり国会で提供されたものをどう取り扱うかという検討でございます。でこの補足10条において、検討を加え、その結果に基づいて必要な措置を講ずると書いていますので、法律の施行までにですね、この国会法を改正をするという作業をしなければならないと私は思っております。
So I'm referring you to this document which has been distributed, which talks about the different items which have been attached as amendments to the draft bill, and this amended sections to the draft bill, and it is 2 pages long. And if you look at the second page, it's point number 10, and Mr. Nakatani read all of it, but basically what it says is that in order to strengthen the functions of the Diet, whatever measures that are necessary to be taken will be taken. And so what I mean by this, what I interpret this to mean is that if some kind of a legislative framework, including the enaction of a law, is considered to be needed, that could very much be considered.
また我が党の石破幹事長からそのような指示を受けて、党内で、それを検討を始め、そして今回合意した4党に民主党を加えた各党にも呼びかけをしてですね、諸外国の実例を参考に、今後各党と検討をしてですね、次の国会に臨んでいくようにしております。
In fact, as I mentioned earlier, Mr. Shiba, our Secretary General, has been very clear that he wants this deliberation analysis study process to proceed. And it is on the basis of this that we have started, we're beginning very soon, internal deliberations within the ruling parties. And it is on that basis that we have planned this mission to go abroad in January with the 4 parties involved in the drafting of the bill and the DPJ, members of the DPJ. In other words, we are going to study firsthand to see what other nations are doing about this issue. And after coming back to Japan, we would like to make preparations to give suggestions in the next session of the Diet.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm very sorry, but time is over. So, but maybe you have another opportunity to ask questions. The Foreign Correspondents Club has a tradition to give their guest speakers a 1-year honorary membership. So Nakatani now is a member. And the best way to get information, even state secrets, is at the bar. Maybe you might meet him somewhere at the bar in the Foreign Correspondents Club and can ask for secrets and other questions. And please remain seated until our guest has left the room. So thank you very much.
どうもありがとうございました。まだまだ説明をしろと言われました。いつでも参りますので呼んでいただきたいと思います。本日はどうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much for your attention. I have been instructed by Mr. Shiba to try to explain this issue as much as possible, so please do invite me back. Thank you.
どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you very much.